So you want to gab about Keith Urban? Pause that, gossip lovers, because first we have to drag ourselves through the dumpster fire Nicole Kidman survived before him. See, to really get what their love story meant, you need to understand the wreckage she crawled out of. Nicole Kidman wasn't just some A-list face. She was a woman who bled everything into a marriage. 10 years, 2 adopted kids, a whole life she carefully glued together next to one of the planet's biggest superstars. And then poof, done. Tom Cruise filed for divorce in 2001. Quiet, ice cold, barely a heads up. She found out from the tabloids. Let that sink in for a sec. 10 years of your existence and you learn it's over through a news headline. People who knew her back then said she looked hollow, like something behind her eyes had just flatlined. She kept working. She always kept working. But that woman strutting down red carpets was hauling something invisible, something brutal. A flavor of grief that doesn't even have a name. Oh, and then came the miscarriage. A pregnancy she'd been secretly hoping for, lost right in the middle of the divorce. She only mentioned it once, years later, in a voice so tiny you had to practically climb into the speaker. She said losing that baby was one of the most agonizing moments of her life. And she carried that pain almost totally solo. The world saw Nicole Kidman, the actress, the icon, the lady in that stunning gown winning the Oscar for The Hours in 2003. That image of her, jaw-dropping, teary, clutching that golden statue, became one of Hollywood's most legendary freeze frames. But behind the cameras, she was piecing herself back together from scratch. She dove headfirst into work. Moulin Rouge the others, project after project. Like if she paused for 1 second, the sadness would tackle her. Friends said she was tough, like scary tough, but even the toughest people get exhausted from holding up the whole sky alone. She once admitted in an interview, quiet, almost to herself, "I just wanted someone to pick me." 5 tiny words, but they carried the weight of every single thing she'd been through. And then, buckle up, drama seekers, one night in 2005 at some charity thing, a guy strolled toward her with a smile she totally didn't see coming. A guitar slinger from Australia. Warm eyes, easy laugh, nothing like the toxic circus she'd been trapped in. His name? Keith Urban? And yeah, something about him felt different. But here's the tea nobody told Nicole. Behind that laid-back grin and those puppy dog eyes, Keith was fighting his own demon. A nasty one. A secret one. The kind that was about to become her problem too. Look, life has those moments that feel like nothing at the time. No swelling orchestra. No dramatic slow-mo. You just lock eyes with someone. And only later, when you're ugly crying into a glass of wine, you realize everything shifted in that one stupid quiet second. For Nicole Kidman, that second was June 2005, a charity gig in New York City. The usual Hollywood meets music snooze fest. Fancy suits, fake smiles, everyone performing their greatest hits for the cameras. Nicole was there doing her signature move, showing up, being gracious, playing strong, suffocating under the armor she'd spent 4 years building after Tom Cruise nuked her world. And then Keith Urban waltzed in. He wasn't the biggest name in the room. Didn't try to be. There was something almost annoyingly relaxed about him, like he didn't need the spotlight to feel like a real human. Witnesses that night say he moved through the crowd differently, laughed easy, didn't perform. Nicole clocked it. They got briefly introduced, exchanged maybe 2 sentences. Nothing epic, no lightning bolt, at least not visibly, but something clicked. Something quiet and warm that she hadn't felt in forever. Keith noticed her too, obviously. But people who know him say it wasn't the movie star that grabbed him. It was something in her eyes. A cocktail of exhaustion and grit that he recognized instantly because he'd seen that exact look staring back from his own mirror. So they started talking, then talking more. Late-night phone calls that stretched into stupid o'clock. Long convos about music, family, and what it feels like to be completely lost inside a life that looks perfect from the outside. She was 38, he was 37. Oh, honey, of course the world had opinions about that. The world always has opinions. But Nicole had officially stopped giving a flying you-know-what. By late 2005, she knew this was legit, something she never thought she'd stumble upon again. After all the garbage she'd survived, no less. And then came June 25th, 2006, almost exactly 1 year after that first awkward meet cute. Nicole Kidman and Keith Urban stood in front of their nearest and dearest on a cliff overlooking the Sydney Ocean and tied the knot. The pics from that day? Stunning. Nicole dripping in a pale champagne gown. Keith staring at her like she was some unicorn he still couldn't believe was real. You know the look? The one that makes total strangers tear up just from flipping through a magazine. Every guest there said it felt genuine, warm, human, not some rehearsed Hollywood act. A real wedding between two legitimately broken people who somehow found each other in the rubble. It should have been the start of a gorgeous chapter. And yeah, in some ways it was. But what went down just 4 months after that dreamy cliffside ceremony? It shattered everything. 4 months. That's how long the fairy tale lasted before the ugly truth crawled into the light. 4 months after that postcard wedding in Sydney, Keith Urban voluntarily checked himself into a rehab center in Nashville. And suddenly the whole world got it. The secret he'd been dragging around long before Nicole ever breezed into his life? Addiction. Keith Urban had been wrestling with alcohol and substance abuse for years. Way before the fame. Way before the sold-out arenas, the CMA awards, and the screaming mobs. It had stalked him quietly through every single chapter of his existence. A shadow that never fully vanished, no matter how blinding the spotlight got. People in his inner circle say he'd fought it before. Had sober stretches, moments where he genuinely thought he'd kicked it. But addiction doesn't play fair. It waits. It's patient. It lurks in the background of your very best days and whispers sweet poison. And somewhere between the wedding, the honeymoon, and the shiny new life he was trying to build with Nicole, that whisper got louder. Nicole found out slowly, the way you always discover this kind of nightmare. Not one dramatic explosion, but tiny signs that gradually became impossible to ignore. A shift in his eyes, a weird emotional distance, and conversations that felt strangely hollow. Moments where the man she married started flickering, like a candle about to suffocate. She's talked about this era with a painfully careful kind of honesty that makes your chest ache just listening. She admitted feeling confused and terrified because, yeah, she loved him like crazy, but she also knew deep down she couldn't be his savior. Newsflash. Nobody saves anyone from addiction. You can love somebody through the mud, but you cannot crawl the road for them. What she did next? That told you everything about who Nicole Kidman really is. She didn't run. Didn't ring up her divorce lawyers. Didn't leak a single word to shield her precious image. Didn't pull that classic Hollywood vanishing act when things turn into a dumpster fire. Nope. She sat with him, talked with him, cried with him, and then she drew a hard line. Not from cruelty, from pure love. She looked him dead in the eye and said, "If you want this marriage, if you want this life we're building together, you need real help. Right now." And Keith Urban, credit where it's due, actually listened. He checked into the Betty Ford Center in October 2006, voluntarily, bravely, fully knowing the second he did, the entire world would feast on his secret. The headlines came fast and brutal, the kind of coverage that strips a human down to their ugliest moment and splashes it on every front page. But Nicole stood beside him, publicly, quietly, fiercely. She visited during treatment, held his hand through the hard hours, became the exact partner most people only daydream about finding. It became one of the most defining moments of their whole relationship. But here's the part nobody ever talks about. What Nicole confessed years later, about how that period truly wrecked her inside, was something absolutely no one expected to hear. Sure, there's a tidy version of this tale. Man stumbles. Woman stands tall. Man gets fixed. They ride off into the sunset. Roll credits. But real life doesn't work that way. And Nicole Kidman, brutally honest to her marrow, never once pretended it did. Keith rolled out of rehab a changed man. Quieter, more present. Like someone who had stared straight into the abyss and decided to nope right out of it. People who saw him in those early sober months said he seemed lighter, more grateful. Like a dude who finally grasped what he almost flushed down the toilet. And for a hot minute, it was gorgeous. They bought a house in Nashville, built a life that looked nothing like the Hollywood circus Nicole had endured for decades. Slower, warmer, actually grounded. Keith would strum his guitar on the back porch at sunset. Nicole would play chef. Simple stuff. Human stuff. The kind of boring, ordinary moments that feel magical when you've spent years drowning in chaos. Then in 2008, their daughter Sunday Rose popped out. Nicole was 40. She sobbed in that delivery room, not just from happiness, but from the crushing weight of everything she'd survived just to reach that second. Then in 2010 came Faith Margaret, baby number 2. Their family felt complete. From the outside, looked like the perfect ending to a painful story. But Nicole has never been a faker. In quiet, thoughtful interviews during those years, she started spilling little pieces of a truth way messier than the happy headline suggested. She talked about fear, a specific brand of fear that never fully leaves you once you've loved an addict. A low-grade anxiety hum that lives in the background of even your best days. You notice stuff other people miss. A slight mood shift. A distant glaze in his eyes. A moment where he's clearly somewhere else. She called it hypervigilance. Always watching. Always checking. Not because she didn't trust him, but because love turns you into a paranoid mess, terrified of losing what you fought so hard to keep. She admitted there were brutal years. Years where the pressure of 2 massive careers, 2 tiny kids, his recovery wait, and her own unprocessed grief from everything before him, created cracks. Not full breaks, but cracks. Long stretches apart. Her filming on one side of the planet, him touring on the other. Weeks passing with nothing but phone screens between them. Those silences, she said, were some of the loneliest she'd ever felt. And trust me, she had known loneliness before. People started whispering. Tabloids circled like sharks. Stories about distance, tension, a marriage quietly gasping for air. And Nicole felt it, that familiar weight of love being tested by the brutal reality of 2 enormous, demanding, sometimes totally incompatible lives. She once said in an interview that there were moments she genuinely wasn't sure they'd make it. Said it simply, no drama, which somehow made it land harder than any screaming headline ever could. But here's the juicy secret nobody knew was cooking behind closed doors during those train wreck years. A conversation was creeping up, one that would force both of them to make a choice. A choice that would either rescue the whole damn thing or torch it completely. See, every struggling marriage hits a point where silence stops being safe, where the unspoken crap gets too heavy to drag around, where one person finally slams everything on the table and goes, "This is where we are. This is what I need. And this is what happens if nothing changes." Nicole Kidman hit that point. And what she did next took more guts than any fake movie role she ever played. She's never used the word ultimatum out loud. She's way too careful for that, too private. But read between the lines of everything she's spilled over the years. The message is loud and clear. There was a reckoning, honey. Friends close to the couple say there was a stretch somewhere in the early 2010s where the marriage was genuinely circling the drain. Not from addiction this time, from distance. Emotional distance. The kind that builds so slowly you don't spot it until one day you're sitting across from your favorite human on Earth and they feel like a total stranger. Keith was touring nonstop. Nicole was filming back-to-back projects. Their daughters were growing up in the gaps between calendars. And somewhere inside the machinery of 2 massive careers, the marriage was getting swallowed whole. Nicole sat him down. Nobody knows exactly what went down in that room. Only they do. But what happened after tells you everything. Keith Urban stopped, genuinely stopped, reassessed every single thing, looked at his priorities with the kind of brutal honesty that only someone who's already lost themselves once can truly understand. He started turning down tours, restructuring his whole schedule around his family, showing up differently, more present, more deliberate, like a man who got reminded at the very last second what actually mattered. And Nicole cracked herself open. For the first time in years, she began talking publicly about their marriage in ways that were startlingly real. No more fake PR polish, just raw, unfiltered honesty. She spilled how brutally hard it had been, how scared she was, how there were moments she mourned her own marriage while still stuck inside it. That specific flavor of grief, sobbing over something that hasn't vanished yet but feels like it's melting through your fingers, is one of the most quietly soul-crushing experiences a human can have. She opened up about therapy, both solo and together, about learning to blurt out the painful truths instead of choking them down, about rebuilding trust not from some dramatic crisis this time, but from conscious choice. Keith sat for interviews where his entire voice shifted when he mentioned her. Slower, softer, like a man hand-picking every syllable because he deeply understood the weight of almost losing everything. He once said, and this made people freeze mid-scroll when they read it, that Nicole saved his life. Not in some Hollywood explosion, not in one big moment, but slowly, consistently, by flat-out refusing to let him vanish. And she fired back something equally gut-wrenching. She said he taught her how to be loved again. After years of self-protection, after years of armor and walls and cautious distance, he had the patience to wait until she finally felt safe. Two shattered people choosing each other on repeat, even when it was agony, especially when it was agony. That should have been the end of the hard chapters. And in many ways it was, but then Nicole started yapping, truly yapping in ways she never had before. And what she finally exposed about their life together made the entire world go dead silent. There's a special kind of bravery that has zero to do with drama. No explosions, no public meltdowns, no viral stunts designed for clicks. It's the quiet guts of a woman who's lived through enough crap to finally stop caring what the world thinks of her truth. Nicole Kidman found that courage somewhere in her 50s. And when she started talking, really talking, the world leaned in close. It began slowly. Tiny moments in interviews where the polished Hollywood veneer slipped just enough to reveal something real underneath. A pause that stretched too long. A sentence that faded into unfinished business. A look in her eyes screaming that there was more, so much more than what she was saying out loud. And then she just said it. In a deeply personal interview that caught everyone completely off guard, Nicole Kidman talked about her marriage to Keith Urban with a raw honesty that felt almost uncomfortable to witness, like accidentally catching something deeply private through an open window. She talked about years of fear, that hypervigilance that never fully disappeared, watching him, loving him, being terrified of the version of him that addiction could still theoretically snatch back at any second. She flat out admitted that for years she had been faking a strength she didn't actually feel. That whole image of the unshakable Nicole Kidman, poised, elegant, untouchable, was partly a costume, carefully stitched together, and absolutely exhausting to keep up. Then she opened up about her daughters, how becoming their mom had cracked her wide open in ways nothing else ever had. How Sunday and faith made her finally understand what unconditional love really feels like. Not that romantic nonsense with its fine print and fears, but the terrifying, limitless love of a mother. The kind that turns you simultaneously stronger and more vulnerable than you've ever been. And then she dropped something about Keith that silenced every single room where it was heard. She said he actually sees her, not the actress, not the icon, not that painstakingly constructed public version of Nicole Kidman that the world has been projecting onto for 30 years. He sees the girl buried under all of it. The one who still gets scared sometimes, still feels lonely in a crowded room, still drags around ghosts from marriages and miscarriages, and moments of deep loss that never fully leave you. And he stays anyway. She said that after everything, after Tom Cruise and the divorce and the grief and the addiction, and the brutal years and the almost lost everything, what she and Keith have built together is the most honest relationship of her life. Not perfect. She made that crystal clear. Never perfect, but honest, real, chosen every single day. Hey, if you've stuck with this train wreck of a story from the beginning, if something in it actually hit you in the feels, smash that like button. Seriously, it genuinely helps more people find these messy, beautiful stories. And if you want more drama like this, hit subscribe. There's a whole lot more coming. So Keith Urban heard that interview. Someone sent him the clip. Apparently he listened to it alone, in total silence. And then he called her. Nobody knows what he said. Only she does. But people close to them say that after that call, something settled between them. Like a door that had been slightly cracked for years, finally clicked shut. Gently, permanently. Nicole Kidman has survived things that would have quietly destroyed most human beings. A soul-crushing divorce, public grief, hidden loss, years of loving someone through their darkest chapter while quietly fighting her own demons. And yet here she is, still standing, still choosing, still refusing to let the hardest parts of her story write the final chapter. She once said in an interview, almost like an afterthought, that she believes some people come into your life not to complete you, but to remind you of who you already are. Keith Urban reminded Nicole Kidman who she was, and Nicole Kidman quite literally gave Keith Urban his life back. Two people, imperfect, scarred, real, still picking each other after everything. Maybe that's the most cinematic love story of them all. Not the perfect beginning, but the deliberate, difficult, beautiful decision to stay. Deliberate, difficult, beautiful decision to stay.